have the awesome privilege also of introducing or presenting, but you already know Ellis Orozco. Ellis Orozco is pastor of First Church Richardson, and he is the husband of Priscilla and the father of Gabriel, Michael, and Celeste. He was born and raised in Pasadena, Texas. Did his undergraduate work at Texas A&M in mechanical engineering. Earned an MDiv from Southwestern Seminary and a Doctor of Ministry from Truett. We all know Ellis Orozco. We know what an outstanding, prolific, profound preacher he is. And we are looking forward to the words of insight and uplift that he's going to provide on this morning. Won't you join me in receiving Ellis? Put your hand together.
Thank you, Dr. Bell. It's great to be here among all my friends, and I appreciate this opportunity TBC has given me, and actually the second time now, and in other places as well. I know at TBC Instrumental and allowing me to preach in Oklahoma, because it gives me an opportunity, or forces me into a discipline of thinking in different ways beyond the week-to-week message, but kind of in a larger kind of way. And so I appreciate the opportunity to do that, to think that through these kinds of things that face us as Texas Baptists, as Christians. Billy, you'll just know, though, next time if you want my topic ahead of time, you need to assign the topic. Assign the topic. It's going to be, the Spirit does move in me, but very slowly. We live in an amazing time. It's an amazing time to be alive. It's an amazing time to be a Texas Baptist. The opportunities are endless. With the exponential growth of technology, we are witnessing the most rapid acceleration of change that the world has ever experienced. Now, with that acceleration of change come new and difficult challenges. As the world shrinks and flattens, cultures collide, faith traditions face off, cultural mores adapt and conform, societal values splinter, and the institutions historically created to deal with these changes tend to flounder. We're now poised at the precipice of a new millennium, not yet 12 years old, staring at the daunting task of navigating these massive changes, these massive paradigmatic changes and shifts with no real historical blueprint to guide us. Now, I've spoken before, thanks to TBC and other venues, of what I believe are some of the key characteristics of the new world that we are living in. Namely, its multicultural features, multicolored features, and anomalous nature. You see, as the world shrinks, colors blend and blur, and things get very messy. I also have spoken to the key role I think Hispanics will play. That's my particular heritage and kind of interest. The key role that Hispanics will play in the future, especially in Texas, not to mention the Southern Hemisphere. If Philip Jenkins is correct, and I think that he is, and the future of Christendom is moving south and east, then Christians of all stripes and colors in Texas are strategically poised to make a difference in that movement. Of all the regions in the United States, we here in Texas, along with California and New York, are the most equipped to understand how Spanglish Christianity moves and grows. We have the size, the experience, the history, and the laboratory, so to speak, that is essential for understanding what the future church will look like. But what I would like to think about together this morning is what I believe will be the most critical character trait of the 21st century, or the most critical, perhaps I should better say, the most critical work of the 21st century. It's the one thing I think that we should be most concerned with and most devoted to. And that is the work of building prophetic communities. Let me briefly explain what I mean by prophetic community and then lay a brief or quick biblical foundation for my rationale. For American Christianity, the Old Testament image of the lonely prophet thundering his message from the mountaintop has been formative. I'm not sure it's accurate, but it is certainly popular. Ask most biblicists their impression of the prophet, and you will get some version of a suffering spokesman alone against the world. It fits our American psyche, where the Lone Ranger was our hero growing up. So they see the prophet as a Lone Ranger without even Tonto to comfort him. Persecuted for his message, ridiculed for his particular perspective, and above all else, always and forever emphatic and confident in the rightness, dare I say, the godliness of his message. Again, I'm not sure that this is the most accurate picture of the Old Testament prophet, but it is certainly the most popular. And today, there is no shortage of those who fancy themselves as preacher prophets in the tradition of Jeremiah and Amos, thundering from their pulpits edicts and warnings against a godless and sinful society. But if you examine very carefully this contemporary rendition of the Old Testament prophet, what you will find, I think, in reality is a prophet who is rarely, if ever, truly persecuted. His message is often convoluted and self-contradictory. The sins he rails against are carefully chosen so as to offend mostly those outside his congregation. And his hand-picked pulpit belongs to a congregation that applauds, if not demands, that type of preaching. In short, he rarely risks anything with his preaching. And in the end, his sermons are, more than anything, self-serving. Certainly more than sacrificial. Now, that is not to say that the day for thoughtful analysis of contemporary issues from the pulpit is a thing of the past. On the contrary, it is needed more than ever. It is just to say, I think, that the work of the pastor and the preacher and the church leadership in the 21st century is not going to be so much to thunder prophetic utterances from the pulpit as it is to build prophetic communities, where the prophetic pulpit is not aimed at the sins of the world, but rather at the sins of the church. And only aimed at the sins of the church in order to build a better church, to build a prophetic community that can distinguish between the voice of the culture and the voice of God. Stephen Carter, in his book, The Culture of Disbelief, contends that a prejudice against the influence of religious commitment upon political issues now characterizes many sectors of American society, including the media, academia, the law, and the corridors of political power. He notes that religious conviction is trivialized and becomes quickly suspect when it seems to be affecting political matters. In plain English, Carter is saying the Christian church in America is being pushed to the margins of the corridors of power. And as an ethnic minority growing up in America, I would say to the church, welcome to the margins, baby. I've been waiting for you. It's not that I disagree with Carter's analysis. I think he's right on target. I think he's absolutely correct. It's just that I see this push to the margins as a good thing for American Christianity, a good thing for the church. In fact, I think it may be the very thing that saves American Christianity. The The church cannot serve a socio-political ideology and Christ at the same time. The church can speak prophetically only from the margins of society, only from outside the corridors of power, never from the center, never from the center. Now hear me well. Both the left and the right seem to be fighting for a place at the center of political power. And any Christianity operating from that position will be a controlling, legalistic, and spiritually oppressive force, unable to distinguish the voices of political allies from the voice of God. Absolutely unable. That is why I contend that the prophetic community becomes imperative in the new millennium. Because it is the community, the church, not the preacher, the church, that can be a prophetic force, speaking and acting from the margins, prophetically, acting and speaking from the margins in a shrinking and dynamically changing world. Now, I say this because I think this was the genius of Jesus. Not that he spoke prophetically. He did. He did speak prophetically. Then don't tell everyone else that Jesus did speak prophetically. He did. But that wasn't his genius. His genius was his ability to build a prophetic community, you see.
Right.
Who do men say I am? Jesus asked. One of the great prophets. One of the great prophets come back to life. Elijah, John the Baptist. You're one of the great prophets, that's what they say. Who do you say that I am? Jesus asked. Peter, I picture Peter standing to say this. He says, you are Messiah, Son of the living God. In other words, you're not a prophet. You're the one who created the prophets. You're the one who creates. Jesus says, on this prophetic word, on this prophetic idea, this concept, I will build my church. You see, it is the Easter message that gave birth to the church. It's the most ancient charisma of the church. It is the church as prophetic community. There is this moment when Jesus' disciples come to Jesus and ask him, teach us how to pray. They weren't asking Jesus to teach them how to pray. Not really. They knew how to pray. They were asking Jesus to teach them how to pray a particular kind of prayer. See, there were three prayer forms in first century Judaism. The prayer of thanksgiving, the intercessory prayer, and the petitionary prayer. Now, all three were a part of the daily regimen of the prayer life of first century Jews. But the petitionary prayer was by far the most controversial. It was considered to be the most dangerous of all prayers. It was considered to be the prophetic prayer, the petitionary prayer, the prayer for self and for world, praying for the world and for self. Petitioning God for self and for world was considered to be a dangerous endeavor that only the wisest sages were capable of effectively navigating. And this is what they were asking Jesus. We can tell from his response, because his response is a classic petitionary prayer. After a 6-word introduction, our Father who art in heaven, there are 6 petitions that follow. Jesus teaches them to pray a petitionary prayer. That's what they were asking him. Jesus delivers what we now call the Lord's Prayer. And it is a petitionary prayer. It is a prophetic prayer. It is a prayer meant to be repeated by the prophetic community, as it was in the first 2 centuries of Christianity. When Jesus first uttered this prayer, it was a very dangerous prayer to pray. It was the kind of prayer that could get you killed. It really was. 6 petitions, all of them radical in nature. And see, here with his prayer, Jesus is infusing the disciples with the prophetic unction that will fuel the community, that will fuel the prophetic community. The first three petitions are strung together by the distributive phrase, on earth as it is in heaven. Properly understood then, it should read, hallowed be thy name, on earth as it is in heaven. Thy kingdom come, on earth as it is in heaven. Thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. You see, this is a radical call for God to come down from heaven to earth. It is a call like the call of Moses, where God says to Moses, I have seen the suffering of my people, I have heard their cries, and I have come down. And Moses says, yes, finally, God, finally, it's about time. 400 years of slavery, it's about time you heard their praise. It's about, come down, God. And then God says, I have heard their suffering, I've seen their cries, I've seen their suffering, heard their cries, and I have come down. So you go, Moses. Moses says, wait a minute, time out, God. What do you mean? What do you mean you go? I thought you said you were coming down. What's this you go business? You see, apparently, Moses going was God coming down. Moses going was God coming down. And this is what the prayer is praying. God, come down, show up. See, this is not pie in the sky heaven when I die. This is not some wistful dreaming of a day of the Lord that is to come at the end of the world when God will make everything right. Jesus is calling us to pray a very radical and dangerous prayer that is asking God to come down now and change things today. To make all that is wrong with the world right. To bring his righteousness and justice to this world now. Today, and it is a radical and dangerous thing to pray. Dangerous thing to pray. He then, in the prayer, turns to the economy. Jesus was an economist. He turns to the economy. Give us this day our daily bread. And the petition for the bread for the morrow conjured up images of the wilderness experience and the manna and quail every day. A time when there was just enough for everyone. No one was given more than enough, and no one went without. One notable English scholar puts it this way, and I'm sorry, I don't do an English accent. I do a pretty good Mexican accent, but I can't do an English accent. One notable English scholar, I would love to do this with an English accent. One notable English scholar puts it this way: Jesus taught us to pray for our daily bread, not our daily cake. In a society such as the one that Jesus lived in a society such as the one that this prayer was first prayed in a society of scarcity, where one drought could wipe out thousands, and many were deprived of the bare essentials for existence. In that kind of society, the prayer for God to provide only what I need for today is the prayer for everyone to have enough. It is a prayer for economic justice. A prayer that would guard me against my propensity for overabundance and overindulgence, a prayer that prays, oh God, never let my propensity to overabundance and overindulgence ever cause anyone else to go without. He continues with the economy. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. I know in America, in England, it's transgressions. In America, it's debts. At the end of the month, it's better to be in America than in England. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Here's another petition for economic justice. In a culture and a time as the one that Jesus lived in a culture and a time, a society where I could lose a child or a spouse to debtor's prison, you see, Jesus prays, forgive me my debts as I forgive those who owe me. This This is a prayer for a society where no one will ever have to go to debtor's prison. Because of an ethic of forgiveness, I would never, O Lord, be the cause of the suffering of another. Jesus says, pray that prayer. Try praying that prayer. You see, Jesus' prayer is radical and dangerous, a prayer that calls for the world to be turned upside down by a new and thoroughly prophetic ethic. In fact, in Matthew's Gospel, the prayer is placed in his Sermon on the Mount, and the Sermon on the Mount that has such a radical love ethic that scholars argue and debate exactly what did Jesus mean with this sermon. He couldn't possibly have meant that we're supposed to follow it. It must have been an intro ethic. Or perhaps he was showing us how sinful we are because we can't follow. He couldn't possibly have meant that we're supposed to follow it because it is too radical. Dangerous prayer. A prayer that calls for the world to be turned upside down. In the early church, it was repeated with fear and trembling. It is the prayer, I contend, that fuels the prophetic community. Walter Brueggemann reminds us that the prophets of the Old Testament were not created ex nihilo, but rather were the creations of the community. Picture a little Jeremiah running around at Torah school. Picture a 5-year-old Amos out in the fields with his father as he teaches him to bind it upon his forehead, his arms, and the doorpost of his house. You see, Brueggemann reminds us that the prophets did not appear ex nihilo. They were the creations of a particular and unique monotheistic covenant community. They were the products of the Torah instruction of the Hebrew community. Their particular spiritual ethos was grounded in the Torah concept of justice. They would, it is true, at certain times, rise up out of the community, speak a word to the community, and then disappear back into the community that shaped them. But always with the community, always with the community. Look at Jeremiah railing against the nation. Babylon, it's coming. We will be taken away in chains. Weeping as he rails. And then when they came, where is Jeremiah? He's in handcuffs with the community, being taken away. Today, we stand at the margins of American society, the church. Hallelujah. Where we're exactly where we're supposed to be, at the margin. Pushed there by powerful societal tsunamis that are reshaping the ethos of our world. They are. It's true. There is much turbulence and violence and despair at the power centers of the world. We have proven it. And I believe that the church stands ready. Texas Baptist, we stand ready at the margins in order to be a prophetic community, speaking and doing God's justice in the world. And I believe that everything depends on it. Father, we thank you for loving us so much and giving us your amazing love. And I thank you for every person in this room, for their commitment and love for you, for your church. And I pray that you would been loans in the